we go. All right. I am Lindsay, LL Cool Games, and I wanted to talk about some video game books that I have been reading recently. I'm trying to remember where this came from, where all of a sudden I decided that I wanted to read some video game, like adjacent books. And what's interesting is currently, right, with the way that entertainment is right now, there are lots of video game books. And I just recently am working on a video about kids books, about nonfiction and fiction books that are video game adjacent, right? So using kids' interest in video games to help them choose better books and choose books hopefully that'll catch them and pull them right in. Okay. So instead, for me, I already love books, especially audiobooks. When I'm busy, right, driving the kids around, doing laundry, whatever, I typically have an earbud in and I'm listening to a book. So I don't even really know kind of where this came from. Maybe just thinking about kids and books was like, maybe there are video game books out that would interest me. And I know there are books about video games. And I know that there are lots of fiction, right, where the fiction is created, either it's like a lit RPG situation where they're writing like straight fiction about potentially like a video game world or something like completely made up, or there are stories that are written to be similar to video games where it kind of reads like you're playing a video game, which sounds super interesting, and I haven't gone there yet. I know like Dungeon Crawler Carl is a series that I'm super interested in. It's definitely on my to be read pile, but I haven't gone there yet. But I wanted to more like read books about video games and about how video games come to be, are part of entertainment, can impact our lives. So what I found actually was some really interesting nonfiction. Any excuse I have to get myself downstairs in my local public library, downstairs to the nonfiction, makes me very happy. Getting to walk through, right, all the books in the Dewey Decimal order makes me happy. So I found a couple and I found them to be really, really enjoyable. But for very, very different reasons. And one of them actually was categorized as YA, which I think is interesting, and maybe it just has to do with the level of like depth that they went into some of the material. The one is definitely not like a kid-friendly book. And then the middle one is kind of like it could be, you know, if there was a middle schooler maybe even that was interested in what's it like to actually make a video game, and how did some of these great, you know, video games that are some like foundational video games for our games now, how did these games come to be? That might be something that I would recommend. But I wanted to just kind of walk through a couple of these books that I have recently ingested, because it was a pretty quick. All three of these books were bam, bam, bam. I really went through them quickly and was happy to come across books that kind of drew me in and kept me. I am frequently a put down, right? I will drop a book. I am not going to force myself to read something. It's not homework, right? I'm an adult and I get to make my own choices. And if I'm not enjoying something, I will stop. I will DNF, right? I will do not finish. I will do not finish a book. Whatever, that's the term. I didn't make it up. So, I guess I'll talk about them in order that I read them. I do have another book, a parenting guide to raising healthy gamers, that I am reading and am not enjoying. So I can let you know that one will be getting dissected and talked about in another video, but we're just gonna kind of talk through these. I'll put up a graphic for each of the books so that you know what the cover looks like. I know some of these titles are very overlappy. There's lots of books with the same title. So I will definitely put up the cover and I will give you the author information so that you, if you're interested, so that you are getting the same book that I'm even talking about. So I guess what started my first book. Okay, so Tom Bissell is the author's name. In 2010, the book Extra Lives came out, and it's Extra Lives is the title, and like if you search for that, Extra Lives is what comes up. But it's Extra Lives: Why Video Games Matter. Like that sucked me in immediately, and then finding out that Mr. Bissell is a Michigan native. Thank you very much. What else is there to do in Michigan but play video games? So he starts off kind of talking about what video games meant to him and what kind of was his foundation with video games. And then he, in great, incredible, amazing personal detail, talks about some of his like foundational, concrete, these are the games that I was playing at these times in my life, and this is why they were beautiful and important, and this is what was happening in my life at the same time. Like, it was a really interesting mash, kind of this autobiographical, list of things that he's played. And then he, I thought, very deftly kind of reflected on why those video games were important to him at that time, what he had found appealing about those games, and why and it's not like he was like even really recommending them, although there were a couple of games where he was like, if you haven't played this, you totally probably should. But just, this is who I was. I guess that's kind of more what it was. This is who I was at that time. This was when it was, this was what was happening, and this was what I was playing and how it impacted my life. And it was amazing. And knowing this was a person who had a journalism background, I do believe he went to Michigan State. And so he's like actively going out and seeking video game people. Like, it didn't really seem he cared too much to start about who he was talking to, if they were designers or directors or just people who were video game adjacent and willing to talk about what Bissell thought about the art of video gaming. And this book I had to chew on quite a bit, because it's not all like sunshine and kittens and rainbows. Like, towards the end of the book, he talks about doing drugs in conjunction with his video game playing, and it's not even, again, not really positively or negatively, it's just, this was what I was doing, drugs associated with this game. And I think it was GTA 4. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like, I get the reflection and the personal development that was going on. This is not a book for children. And as a person who's trying to raise healthy children who are having a healthy relationship with video gaming, this guy was not a role model. But at the same time, the way that he was able to kind of parse out who he was and what was going on and how those video games were impacting him at the same time was incredibly reflective and introspective, and a very interesting way to not only look at the art, look at the games, look at the interaction, but also to then see yourself through that lens. Was super interesting. But yeah, at the end of the book, he gives a really interesting interview, and they're talking about the importance of video games as art. And as someone who has always appreciated video games, I guess I've never really like stopped and thought of, it's like watercolor or like, like any kind of craft or art form. Video games are an art form. And I had to kind of like step back for a minute and think about what that means to me, and how the art, right, the style of gameplay, the types of games, the beautiful games that I like to look at are different than the games that my kids want to look at or the games that my husband necessarily wants to play. And that's a really interesting reflection on who we are as people and gamers. And it has a lot to do, I think, with our experience with where we have been as gamers, but also where you're willing to go, right? Not even necessarily where you want to go, where you're willing to go, the things that you're willing to see and do and try, and be able, the thoughts that you're willing to think about yourself and how a game is going to impact you and change who you are. I just wanted to list a couple of the games because he's a little bit older than me, so some of his games were kind of earlier than maybe where I would have been playing them. He talks about GTA 4, talks about Mass Effect, Fallout 3, Gears of War. Totally not games that are necessarily games that I think, oh, those are like the top of my TBR pile, right? The top of my, I need to play this, my backlog. I definitely do need to play Mass Effect, right? I definitely, I think BioShock was in there too, right? There's a lot of really good like sci-fi storytelling games that I definitely do want to play, but even like Gears of War and some of the details that he gives behind the way, because he talks about not only like the game as it was presented to him as a consumer, but also the way that it was created, that it was constructed. He knows and did some interviews and so on behind the scenes for these games also, so he knows how they're talking about, you know, there's no character creation, you know, you're kind of thrown in as this guy in this group, and then that's just kind of who you are, as opposed to other games where main character customization is a huge part of the game, and so you get to be in the game. It's just so interesting, things that we just kind of take for granted, things that it's just like, oh yep, it's that kind of game. Like you don't even necessarily stop to think about that kind of different levels of immersiveness that you can get by character creating or by not. It's a different game and it has a different experience. He talks about the social relevancy of especially a lot of these like shooter games, a lot of the military games, that kind of stuff. Like why are we so interested and invested in these kinds of games? Why are these the kinds of games that are still, you know, making a ton of money in today's society? And this was back in 2010. So the one thing that I would absolutely love is for this human person to write me another book. I want to know what he's been playing since 2010. I want to know what his opinions are on some of these games that have these crazy, amazing, over-the-top graphics. Just even, you know, the video game awards this last fall, who won? Not necessarily the most realistic and the most up in your face, absolutely gorgeous game. It was a game with beautiful graphics, but it also was kind of a silly, playful game that had a different attitude. And so you treated it differently, and you came out of the gameplay feeling differently than you would maybe playing some of the hyper realistic games that were also up for Game of the Year. So just a lot to think about. Extra Lives, exceedingly well written. This author knows what he's doing, and I hope he writes another book. Like, see if I can find this guy's email and be like, hi, will you write me another book, please? So after that one, I went very quickly into, so it's Jason Schreier is his last name, into 2017's Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. There is actually a sequel since then. It's called Press Reset. Came out in 2021. But again, these ones are more about making video games, like the business, the companies, the people, the muscle, right? The things that go on before a game is even released. And honestly, he really doesn't even talk about, you know, a ton of gameplay and post-production, and a ton of the actual like consumer experience really isn't talked a whole lot in Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. It's the man hours and the creative genius that goes into creating this. And again, he does call video games an art form in his book, which I think is fascinating. And so now it's kind of like made me kind of sidestep a little bit. It's like, now I'm super interested in thinking about video games as an art form, as opposed to just entertainment, just like a lot of people think about movies, right? Movies are beautiful, and movies are an experience, and movies are these things. Is it art? And there definitely are people who think about it that way. So yeah, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels is definitely more of like a behind the scenes. It is, starts huge, the companies. It talks about Bungie, it talks about Blizzard, and then it breaks it down to the projects. And it talks about, timelines and money and the teams and the way that they broke up the projects all the way down to, he names names. He knew people who were working on things, talking about the hours that they put in. He does talk some about money, but he talks very much about, like struggling with that work-life balance, which I know does not exist. After reading some of these things, and you kind of know that already about the video game creation, machine that exists nowadays. When it's crunch time, and you have to get this stuff done. He talks about people sleeping in their cubicles and that kind of stuff, which is nuts. But there's so many cats in this room right now. It's really interesting because at the beginning of the book, it talks about basically like video game magic, right? It's talking about the things that are happening and the crazy way that the systems are changing, and it kind of fades into, oh, is this okay? Should we be doing this? Is this work-life balance healthy? Is it worth it? Should we be asking people to crunch? Like, the systems kind of matured a little bit as we went on through. He talks about Dragon Age Inquisition. He talks about Stardew Valley, which was super fascinating, and I kind of personally relate to being a one-man band and wanting to be able to do whatever you can, but it also means that you can do whatever you can, right? Like, can you imagine saying, I'm gonna make this game and look at all this stuff that I can put in it. Oh, and I want to add this and I want to add that, and that's why it took as long as it did. Thank you, Egon, for helping me. Stardew Valley, he talks a lot about Bungie creating Halo into Halo 2, and it's almost more about that transition from Halo into Halo 2 and how they restructured and reworked the teams and how people were able to kind of fluidly move along with the projects. It talks about Destiny, it talks about Diablo 2 and 3, and at the time 2017 it was kind of hinting at Diablo 4. He even talked about like the technical difficulties, right, when Diablo 3 came out, and all the codes and all the hiccups and how the community's response. So it's very, very detailed. Like, if you don't care about the day that Diablo 3 came out and the error code that was getting thrown, don't read this. Like, if you don't care about those kind of details, it's not your kind of book. Personally, as almost, obviously it's nonfiction, but as a reference guide, as kind of that behind the scenes hand holding, walk you through this is what was happening, these are the things that they did, this is what making a video game has been like in the past, and how that can hopefully reflect on how video game creation is going to change for the future. I think it was like 10 chapters, 10 different games, and it kind of was just like a snapshot, but they also kind of moved throughout time too. Like, one was the furthest back and then up through. So you kind of felt that change and how the excitement definitely faded more into, oh, how are we going to make the most money, and into microtransactions, where there were not microtransactions back right when the Halo team was working on things. Super interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I honestly was surprised how quickly I did go through it, and how quickly I wanted to go through it, if that makes sense. And that one actually really quickly wound down, and then I wound up finding a book called Game On. It has an exclamation point there. Game On. Video Game History is what it's called, from 2019. Dustin Hanson, he was a video game director who worked in the industry, and knowing people and getting to interact about video games with people who have made video games is phenomenal. He also has a follow-up to this called The Greatest Stories Ever Played, which will absolutely be moving up my to be read pile. I know it's on Audible, so we'll be getting that one. Because that's why I play video games, is for the story. And now that I'm thinking about video games as an art form, that story, right, is what pulls me in no matter what the game looks like, right? Horizon Forbidden West, as I'm playing right now, has an incredible story and looks amazing, but Sea of Stars, that story, like, it could have been pencil sketches and I wouldn't have cared, right? That story from Sea of Stars just had me so hard. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Anyway, okay, book. I love talking about books. So Game On is listed as a YA book. It is nonfiction, listed as a young adult. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't go into some of the, like, finger quote gory details, the behind the scenes stuff quite as much. Yeah. So I guess I don't know exactly why it was YA. I never felt like it was, like, talking down to me or like it was skimming over things. And in fact, the opposite. It was presented in really good language, like it used appropriate, right, like video game terminology and that kind of stuff. And then it even, like, kind of took it that one step further, as it kind of gave you super interesting factoids and things, relevant information and kind of related things to one another as you went through the book, to kind of keep you interested and keep things moving. Because it started all the way back to Pong, and it kind of even gave you like a why. Like, why did video games happen? What was going on that made it possible that video games could even exist? And then it kind of, from Pong, it built onto, it talked about some arcade games and that kind of stuff. It talked about Pac-Man. It talked about Pac-Man arcade versus Pac-Man on the Atari. And then it kind of transitions into console gaming and talks about the difference in the industry between those two things. And then it's still kind of relating it to computers, and it just kind of moves through time, all the way up to, I think Uncharted was really the last, like, really detailed place that it wound up. This was from 2019, yeah. So it's not like reading a video game encyclopedia where it's like, Pong released in this year and it was invented by this guy. The information is there. Like, if you need it as a reference guide, this is a great place to be. That said, it's not gonna be in alphabetical order, right? Where you can just turn the pages and flip to something else. It's a really easily digestible, I had it in my ear and I certainly was able to pay attention with it moving along. And then the author, having worked in video games, right, and again, grew up in video games, had a lot of interesting, relevant personal stories and so on that fit in there. And I really enjoyed this book. Having, the idea of Pong kind of fading in and seeing the branches almost as things kind of spread out, and then the console wars, and what's gonna happen, it kind of all pulls back in, and then we get arcades and we start getting back into home consoles, and there's handhelds and PC gaming, and there's all these other interesting things that kind of all just weave throughout time as we're talking about things. So he does talk about, right, the uprising of things like Steam, and why Steam came to be, along with the internet, and how internet changed gaming. It's a really neat roadmap to kind of be able to look back and appreciate. It's written from a very positive and appreciative standpoint, to be able to look back and appreciate where we've been, kind of how we've been, which is a really interesting thing to say, kind of how we've developed these things as we're going along through time, and even some of the whys, right? Why this game? Why did this happen? Why was this put in and why was this left out? Why was this changed between here and here? How you get a perfect score in Pac-Man, and why that is what it is. There were just lots of really neat little personal details that went along with each game that kind of helped keep things moving, and you never really felt mired down with, dates and times and game titles and, just data. It never was that problem. Yeah, and so Greatest Stories Ever Played, I can't wait. After having consumed Game On and enjoyed that material so much, I really look forward to seeing what Greatest Stories Ever Played has to offer and how that's going to kind of fit with Game On also. Right? Is he going to do retro stuff? Is it all going to be like more modern stuff? I don't think so. But yeah, so I really think that this has been a positive gaming experience for me, to be able to kind of wander off a little bit, because I can't play video games all day, every day. I can't. There's a lot of things that have to get done in this house. There's a lot of things that have to get done by me in this house. So it's nice to have something where I still feel tied to video gaming, where I'm still thinking about gaming. I'm thinking about my gaming. I'm thinking about community video gaming, and I'm thinking about parenting and video gaming, which is a really important thing. Important in my house and important to personally anybody who has kids these days. They're getting exposed to screens, which means they're getting exposed to video games. They're getting exposed to screen media, and I really think it's an important thing for parents and families to think about what media is being consumed. And I really want to be able to, as a parent, be focused and thinking about each of my kids, think about myself, again, reflecting back on video games as art. How do I feel after consuming something like this? How do I feel? How do I want to feel, right? Playing, this is my downfall right now. Playing Balatro at bedtime does not feel good. Why? Because I'm not good at Balatro when I'm tired, because I have to be able to like focus and zone in and think about what I'm doing and the deck that I'm trying to build associated with the jokers that I'm trying to use. I can't do it at bedtime. I have to stop. Like, I love having my Switch light lives on my bedside table so that it's there. So when I crawl into bed at night, right, throw my heating pad on my chest and I play Balatro for a while till I'm doing one of these. I can't do that anymore. It's too frustrating right before bed. I need to play Super Mario World and just relax and play something that's kind of mindless, and I can just play it. And then if I'm falling asleep and getting chased by moles, it's not the end of the world, right? Like it'll still be a positive experience. It'll still be kind of helping myself detach a little bit, but it's also not super frustrating because I'm terrible at Balatro when I'm tired. You just have to kind of think about how things are impacting you in a personal way, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be different for everybody, and it's also going to be different in the morning versus at night. Like it's just a really interesting thing. So many people think of video games as so shallow, right? It's just video games. It's not. It's really not. And if we are going to think of video games as art, and we're going to treat it as impactful as other media and other art forms can be, we have to take video games seriously. And I know something as simple as, right, Suika game, which is basically a math game. Like, what even is that? Like a matching math? It's still art. It's cute, it's fun, it's light, it is something I can play at bedtime, right? Like, and I hope through talking about this, talking about different authors and different books and different ways to think about video games and to kind of apply ourselves away from the screen to think about what we're consuming and how we're consuming it and how it does impact our lives. And then for parents, you have to kind of take it that second step, right? And what our kids are consuming and how that's impacting their lives, and how important it can be for that curation to make sure that you're helping structure where we can, right? The screens that they're exposed to at school, I really hope school's doing a good job, right? you gotta stay in touch. You gotta stay up on, what are you doing? What are you guys covering? What is that school computer being used for? That's something I know that I struggle with. And I know a lot of families struggle with that extra screen time at school. Um, so make sure that the screen time that you can control, that you can have a say in, make sure that it's a positive one. Make sure that it's going the places and doing the things and telling the stories that you want the people that you're responsible for to experience. Those kinds of things that are going to help them grow up and be the people that the world needs them to be, and do the things that they need to be able to do in their lives. Please, if you have an adult video game book, if you have something that you would like to share, drop it in the comments. I'm going to definitely leave these titles and some others that I've been checking out recently. I will definitely leave those below also. And as always, I will definitely say, check your local library. That is such an incredible resource that we all sometimes can kind of forget is there. And I'm so spoiled with our library as a resource that I can make any request, and my library never fails to impress. So go read a book, enjoy it. Let me know if you know something video game adjacent that you think that I would enjoy, something that you have enjoyed. And I guess until next time, thanks for playing, everybody.